waiting, let's talk a bit about what each of us has been writing recently. I just started a science fiction novel and read it for the first time to a group of people last night. And well, suffice to say that it didn't go as well as I'd hoped, but in part because they had a limited amount of time, and my first chapter would take 2 different sessions to read it. So they got the first half and they said, oh, you need this, 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 and this, and they were all in the second half. But I don't know how it would work, but I got some useful input from that. So anybody else, what are y'all working on? Yes, Linda.
Well, I have my 2 children's books out and published, and so I'm kind of maybe doing this a little bit backward. Now I'm looking at all the different ways to market it.
Okay.
And
well, that's
initially
good.
I had the writers conference was my goal, to have it done by that as kind of my debut, and then that thing got canceled or postponed or put online. And so now I'm looking at, other ways to market it, and the social media stuff is not my strength. My first attempt with a Facebook page was disastrous. I ended up with so many very inappropriate Facebook calls on my personal phone, and it was really quite horrible. A lot of porn and videos, and oh my gosh, it was just a nightmare. So I pretty much have just unpublished the page for the time being till I figure out how to do this more effectively and not attract the wrong kind of people. So
yeah, that certainly is a
I hate the
concern.
term wrong kind of people.
But we all know what you're talking about. Yeah. We know what you're talking about. Like
oh my gosh, my eyes were opened. I tell you, it's like, what a mess. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm looking for a lot of different ways to go about marketing this. In my past, I published with publishers who did all the marketing and all the work and all the promotional stuff. And so it's really different to now have to own up and take care of it myself. It's quite a different approach. Well, so,
in today's book market, even the publishers expect you to do your own marketing. That's why they want to know if you've got a platform. Because they're profit driven, so they are focusing on the books that they know will sell. So if you're Stephen King, which means you're going to already sell 2 million books, they're going to advertise it and promote it heavily. So then he'll sell 3 or 4 million books, because they make money when they can sell that many. And they're not going to help me to, I have one client who's published by Wild Rose Press, and within the limitations, they've been very helpful. But basically, it's like going on Amazon and dropping the Kindle price to 99 cents so we can do a volume promotion to either get a bestseller status or to get a bunch of reviews. That's about it. They can't do it. The marketer covers the whole publishing company, and she has other duties that don't have anything to do with marketing. So they do what they can, and they're very good about it and very helpful, but it's still not much. So if you don't know social media and how to do these things, the best thing to do, and we'll get into this in more detail, but the best thing to do is to find somebody who can help you. Because if you know how to do it, it's piece of cake. If you don't know how to do it, and I'm saying this as someone who does not know how to do it. So I'm not saying I do it. I have a guy I go to who knows how to do it and does it for me and for my clients. I don't want to try doing it myself because I'd rather be writing or giving interviews or doing something else that's more productive and not such a waste of my time. But it's still necessary to be done. Okay. Anybody else want to talk about what they're writing?
Can you hear me? I will. Rose.
Yes.
Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
I am fine, thank you. So I've switched over. I have a Kickstarter for a screenplay that I have. Actually, not even a screenplay. It's for a TV drama comedy that I'm gonna pitch after I make the pilot. So
So that's a whole other
Okay.
thing, even knowing what goes on with Kickstarter. That's a whole, other beast to have to know, I had to go through a whole thing just to get, I didn't do this right. I didn't do that right, whatever. Now I'm halfway to my goal. And then even to figure out, I started out with $1,000 goal and then I'm like, nah. So I got a $500 goal, which I'm halfway there. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I figure no one reads, but they watch TV. So that was my.
Well, there's a certain measure of truth in that. In crowdfunding, the key word in crowdfunding is crowd. If you do not have a crowd of people
Right.
following you,
Right.
it's very hard. I'll get into this more, but let me just mention that you may have, I've probably got 2,500 people who follow me on Facebook. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but there's a bunch of people there, and I probably follow most of them. But if I even know the names of more than 50 or 100 people, I'd be really surprised. The rest of the people, I said, oh, well, hey, you and I have some friends in common, so let's be friends and fine. But there's no buy-in there. There's no commitment there. And without the commitment, then the platform means nothing. And I will address that specifically when we talk about virtual platforms later tonight.
So, and I also noticed, even because I'm just on Instagram now, I got off of Facebook a year ago. So on Instagram, even if you hint at, for $20, you can get a credit on my pilot, just $20, it's like you're begging. I hate that, and I don't have that many friends and family, so I don't know. But anyway, I have two really good friends that gave $100 each. So I'm halfway there just because I have two good friends, not a whole lot of friends.
When we talk about virtual platform, you'll see how you can increase that number exponentially without making new friends.
Oh, good.
So it's remarkably easy to do. And we'll talk about that. Okay. Anybody else want to talk about what they're writing?
Ned.
Yes.
I have no way of holding up my hand here, but I do. I published a book a week ago Sunday.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
It's a book of poems, and I'm having a bit of time getting into Ingram Sparks, but I'm working on it.
Okay. So is that like your fourth book you've had published?
It's the poems that were originally written into the original manuscript of The Courage of a Butterfly, my novel.
Right.
I took them out because they're like speed bumps for most people, and I decided to publish them separately this way.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Okay. Anybody?
Valerie, yours is on the way.
Who's on the way?
Valerie beta read for me, so I promised her a book.
Oh, okay. Good. Okay. Anybody else want to talk about what they're writing? All right. Well, then let's go ahead and get started. If other people join us, they'll come in the middle. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about book promotion and marketing, launching your book and marketing it. And let me just give you a real quick thumbnail on why maybe you want to listen to me. First of all, I've had 39 books published since 1982, and there were royalty published books, self-published books, and then ghostwritten books where the client I was writing for arranged to have them published. I've got 10 Kindle historical novels. I've written 10 business books. I'm currently working on 4 books that I hope to get out this year, and one of them is on how to market and promote your book. And I've been doing marketing since 1985, when I realized I had about 7 books in the market at that time, and they weren't selling all that well, and I wasn't getting the royalties I wanted. So I asked my publishers, what are you doing to market it? And it was like, well, I don't know. And I said, do you mind if I market it? No, go ahead. This was before everybody was assumed to have to be a marketer. This was early on. And very quickly, all of my books sold out their entire press run. which is almost unheard of in that niche market of business books. They would print up 1,000 books and hope to sell 600 or 700 of them, and they would be selling 200 or 300 of them. And I got them up to 1,000, or in one case 2,000. And this was good money at the time. One of the books, for instance, sold for $497. So as you can imagine, my royalty was pretty significant. That was the most profitable book I've ever done. And what I do for a living now is I help authors, some of them with the writing of their books, but others of them with the marketing book. So I'm doing this all the time, and I try to stay on top of it. So before we get into the specifics, I want to tell you the horror story. A few may have heard it before, but I think it's instructive. I had a client come to me. He had written a book that was a political expose of one of the leading presidential candidates. This was in an election year, and he actually had grown up with the presidential candidate, and they were both members, family members of families that were like from the original Mormon group. They were, seventh generation Mormons. So you can probably figure out which candidate I'm talking about. Anyway, he had a falling out with the guy. They'd been fraternity brothers at Brigham Young, and then they had a falling out. And the author got excommunicated, and the other one became a bishop. So they had there was a lot of bad blood there, but there was a lot of information that was useful for people trying to evaluate what this candidate really stood for. And so we went, because it was of national interest, we went to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., which is like a big fraternity house for reporters. And they hang out there between news stories. So if you have a press conference there, it's generally pretty certain that you'll get some attendance. We had 40 reporters and 4 TV crews show up to launch this book. Over the next few days, we had over 500 distinct citations that I could find doing a Google search where this story had been picked up by the Washington Examiner, an international cable business news program, Sirius satellite radio, and hundreds of other locations. We really covered the waterfront on this, but a couple of problems. And the first one was this book was only available as an ebook, and this was a number of years ago, and ebooks weren't as popular as they are now. Second of all, it was not available on Amazon. So if you wanted to buy it, you had to buy it from him directly at his website. And this was at a time when people still were not wanting to go to a one-line website and buy something. They didn't trust it. So we got 500 favorable reviews. We had interviews that were broadcast on radio and on television. We were in daily newspapers. We were everywhere, and he sold fewer than 10 books. The promotion worked, but he insisted on the business model. We kept telling him, you got to be on Amazon, and you got to do a print book. And he refused, and because he knew better. And the outcome of that was that I actually had to file police reports because I got 2 death threats from him. That is not the way it's supposed to work. The way it's supposed to work is that you get those 500 listings and referrals, and then you start selling books because you're on Amazon, and maybe because you're also in bookstores. And that's a kind of a strategic decision you have to make. So let's get started here. I'm going to talk about the book launch, and then what to do afterwards. First of all, you got to have a website. And the website does not have to be big. 5 pages is plenty, but you want to have a landing page, which talks about the basics of the book. It has a place where you can subscribe to a free newsletter by the author, which is something that you all should do if you have books out there, is to have a newsletter. It can only be a page or 2, it doesn't have to be much. It should be regular, and it should tell people about the book and about what you're doing to promote it, personal appearances you're making. Remember personal appearances? We'll come back to that in another world, but we'll eventually have them again. But let them know what's going on. Then you have the About page. And the About page is first about you and why you're the writer, what makes you interesting. I'm working right now with a mystery writer who's written a police procedural mystery. Well, he's a retired police officer. So he lived this story, and it has that authenticity that you can only find when somebody had spent years working in the trade. So that you talk about that, and you can, if there's frequently asked questions, it would go there. Then you want to have a media page, and this is for the news media. This is for people, reporters, interviewers, people like that who come to you and they want to find out if your book's worth recovering. So here you put your background, which is a more detailed and focused kind of biography. You want to have a selling bio, which is just the part of your biography that relates to the book, like this, the client I mentioned, that he was a police officer. Okay. He also used to go and he was a photojournalist and took pictures at car races and then wrote up stories about them for the news and illustrated them. That has nothing to do with the murder mystery, so we don't put it in there. You have illustrations, show the book cover, front and back, photo of the author. Any good reviews that you get on Amazon or Goodreads or anything like that, copy them on your web page. And then you have press coverage. And this includes press releases that you might have sent out, actual press coverage that got links to that, links to interviews you've given on TV or radio or on podcasts, things like that, where people can go and say, yeah, this person, this book, it's interesting, let's cover it. And then you have a sales page where you set up where you're an Amazon affiliate. And do you all know what an Amazon affiliate is? Okay. You can sign up for free. You can sign up for free, and they give you a link, and you link you give your link to the books that you want to promote. And if somebody comes to your website and clicks on that link and goes to Amazon and buys the book, you get a commission. It's not a big one, but it really, I mean, when we're dealing with nickels and dimes, this will give you a few more quarters to enjoy it. Give you, for instance, last year I made $41.41 from Amazon that way. So I took my wife to dinner. I mean,
Okay.
I got to still got early for books. Okay. So the next thing you want to do, and this is perhaps the biggest thing we'll talk about tonight, is creating a virtual platform. Now, before we got started, I explained why platforms are not as important as they seem to be, because if you got 2,500 strangers you can contact on Facebook, but none of them care about you, then you can post that you got a new book and nobody's going to care. Instead, what you want to do is go to topical Facebook groups. Facebook has groups on everything. Go to topical Facebook groups and join them and become a member and periodically post there. Now, they have rules against self-promotion. So you can't just say, go buy my new book. There's a workaround, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you go there and you make a name for yourself by discussing what's going on. Now, getting back to the mystery writer client of mine, when I was starting this with him, I went to Facebook and searched for Facebook groups on murder mysteries. And I just took the first 10 that appeared. They didn't appear in any particular order. And each one shows how many people are members of that group. And in 10 groups, I found 39,800 people. Now, some of those people are going to overlap between groups because mysteries. Excuse me, whoever's got the dog, you could have a mute button in the lower left-hand corner of the screen.
Hey, can everybody mute while he's talking? Because I keep hearing background noise.
Please. Hey, Linda.
Yeah, can everybody mute, please? I'm gonna mute back, okay?
Yep, there you go. It's all, that was, Ed, that was you, your dog. So I went ahead and muted you.
Okay.
You can always unmute yourself once you're, yeah, your dog was interrupting Ed.
Okay, that's why I have cats. Cats never bark. Okay, getting back to creating your virtual platform. In 10 groups, 10 random groups that did murder mysteries, I found 39,800 people. And assuming that there's an overlap, I said, okay, let's call it 20,000, not 40,000, but 20,000 people. One promotion that does averagely well, which would be a half of 1%, would sell you 100 books. That's power. That's marketing power, because you can repeat it and repeat it. Now, to do the promotion, and this is where it gets a little tricky, these groups will not allow you to put like a link to Amazon or something like that. What you do is say, I've got a blog that I've just written about something about my book, something from my book. I've got a blog. I'd like you to come read it. And they link over to your website. And since that's a non-commercial link, that's fine. That's okay. That doesn't violate the rules. There, they read what the blog is. And in the blog, it says, and if you want to buy the book, click here. And there you go. That way, you can attract people without being kicked out. And I say without being kicked out. One time I had a client get kicked out of a group that was right on target for him. It had 78,000 members. And he posted a link after I told him not to. And with these groups, it's one strike and you're out, because they don't want the kind of spam that one of you was talking about earlier tonight, that you put up a Facebook page and you suddenly get spam porn and spam this and hostile. They don't want that. So you show any signs of commercial linkages and boom, you're out of there. But asking them to come to your own website or your own Facebook page to see a blog, that's perfectly fine. So that's how you do it. And by using standard social media techniques of first you comment on what other people post, and then you start posting things on your own that are topical to the thing. And you can say, this information is based on my book, which is titled this, but still you're not promoting the book. You're just giving some information based on the book. People begin to recognize your name. People in that group, they recognize your name. Some people respond to it. Most of them are not active in the group, but they still watch it, still read it. So you become a named person. And then if you can get them to come to your blog and then say, buy my book, you're going to get some impact out of that. And that's creating a virtual platform. And that saves an awful lot of time that you would otherwise spend social media wise in getting followers who don't know you and don't care about you. Before you launch, you want to get together media lists. Certainly local media, because you want to get interviews and get them talking about it. And in any local community, wherever you are, if you've written a book, that's more newsworthy locally than it would be nationally. So with that, you can wind up on that early morning Channel 3 talk show. I love getting clients there, and I hate getting clients there because you have to be at the studio at 6 a.m, and I'm a night person. But hey, to get a client on TV, I'll be there. But you want to have these media lists, and a place to get them is from a man named Dan Janelle, and his business is PR Leads. Used to be, I paid $750 a week, and I was very glad to be able to get a good comprehensive list for $750. It was a bargain price. If you buy the service, it's going to cost you $6,000 or $7,000. Dan will send you lists for, I think the first one is 150, and then after that it's 75, something like that. It's very reasonable. I've recently bought 7 lists from him, and I'm very glad, very, very pleased with the quality of this. I've been working with him for years, but I needed some new lists for some clients, and it's very easy, and they do it in a day or two. It's really good. So Dan Janelle at prleads.com is where you go to get media lists. Okay, now that you've got everything set up, ready to go, and other things that you might want to consider, like if you're going to do personal appearances, when COVID is over and we can start doing personal appearances again, you're going to want to have like posters and these floor standing banners that are vertical and show the book cover and the author picture and just the title. Because at a personal appearance, people will see that and it stands out, whether you're at the Barnes and Noble or at Dime Grinds or a writer's group or a coffee house. Having that extra promotional material helps. Plus, you give out bookmarks with the book on it, business cards, what have you, so that when you do appearances, you're ready for them. So that's just all the basics. Now you want to get set, and that means planning the launch events and the book signing parties. And this means finding people in a community who will show up in sufficient number to make it worth your while. I had an author a couple of years ago who she was here in Vegas. but she's originally from Cleveland. And what she wrote about in the book was based on what happened in Cleveland when she was 21. And that was particularly that her father died very young. Anyway, so she had we had a book signing here, and there must have been 75 people show up. And I think she sold 30 or 40 books at $18 a pop, which is not bad. She self-published, so she got to make the lion's share of that. She went back home to Cleveland, and she invited everybody who had attended the funeral of her father. She had the registration book, and she invited everybody. She had sent out 300 invitations, and 170 people showed up. Now that's remarkable, 170. But this man was really a powerful force for good in his community. He was a baseball coach that would teach teenagers, and he didn't just teach them how to play baseball, he taught them life lessons. And he taught them very practical and useful life lessons, and that just helped push it. So 170 people showed up. She sold 70 books at $18 a pop, and one of her life goals was to travel the world. So she took that money and went to Iceland. Now, Iceland's not top of my list of places I want to go. And she went in June, and she sent me a picture of her in Iceland in June wearing a parka. But she was thrilled. She had 2 life goals. One of them was to travel the world, and the other was to see a Major League Baseball game in every Major League stadium in the United States. And that's some of what the book enabled her to do. I mean, when you're single and 25 and have some money coming in, why not go after your dreams? Okay, so you plan your events, and you're going to have invitations. You need to have a right location, and you plan out your launch events. Basically, you develop a marketing plan for the launch. Then you get to the phase I call kick the tires. And this is you double check everything. Make sure that there have no typos, that you have not overlooked anything, that you're not double dipping, just whatever. You double check everything, then you send out your announcements, and then you send out reminders. And if you announce that in 3 weeks I'm going to have this book signing, you better be prepared to send out 3 reminders, including one the morning of the event. Now, they should each be different, because if you send the same thing, people will think they're getting spammed and they'll turn it off. But if you send very different things, all will go into the same thing. I'd love for you to come to this. There'll be refreshments here. Please come and have a drink with me, and we'll have a nosh, and then maybe you want to buy my book. When you start it up, you get there early. You have a volunteer staff. You don't have to pay for staff. People will volunteer to help you. Unless you're a social troglodyte and live in a cave, you're going to know people who will show up and help you out. So you want to have volunteers. She had volunteers coming from as far away as Tucson. Family members who lived out west came to the signing here to help out, and made a big difference. Then you pull the trigger. You have the launch party. You have a book tour, which can be real or it can be virtual. A real one is actually where you go to a place like New York City or Los Angeles or Atlanta. You go and have interviews with media people, print, broadcast, internet, media people. And because it's one-on-one, they're not, if they spend an hour's time with you, then they're going to want to do something about it. They're not doing it for your health. They're going to, use it. So you set those up in advance. That's where your media list comes in. And then you go to these towns, or you do it virtually using Zoom technology like we're doing, or Skype or something like that. And part of this, the book tour can be going to locations where you can sign books, like Amazon, if it had stores. Barnes & Noble would be a good example. If you are a print book that Barnes & Noble can order online from a distributor, then there's a good chance you can have you can do book signings there. So you want to plan that out. And let's say your story was set in Reno, Nevada. Even if you're based here, you're going to want to make sure that you go to Reno and talk to the media there, and talk to writers groups and senior centers, people looking for something to do, some entertainment. You want to capitalize on the location in the book. That's important. If there is a special interest in your book, then you want to do that as well. And here's an example. Many of you will know who I mean when I say Lawrence Block. He's a mystery writer that has been around since the late 50s. For about 2 decades, he wrote the fiction writers column in Writer's Digest every month for a long time. He's had 4 or 5 books out on writing, and probably more than 100 mysteries. He's a very prolific writer. And he came up with a character a while back, and all the books reflected who the character was. He was a hitman. So it was Hitman or Hit List or Hit This or Hit That, whatever. And he was a really nice guy who just happened, I mean, his day job was killing people, but very specific people, and he made a good living. So one thing about the Hitman was that he was a stamp collector. And whenever he would go to a town to kill somebody, he would go to the local stamp store and he would invariably find a stamp that he needed for his collection. He would talk about the stamp and its, its background, its history, why it was important to his collection, all this kind of stuff. Well, at that time, I was a stamp collector too, so I was aware of this. And I got the National Stamp Collectors magazine, and there he was on the cover of the magazine, and he had been the keynote speaker at the National Stamp Collecting Society meeting that year. And 10,000 people showed up to hear him talk. I can't even imagine how many books he sold, but they cared about him because he wrote about a character who collected stamps. They were not mystery fans. Some of them were, some of them weren't, but they were all stamp fans. They were fanatic about it. And when he wrote about him, boy, they made him a hero. I saw the same thing with a guy who did a UFO movie. It was really interesting. It's kind of one of those found video kind of things. Anyway, he wound up on every UFO talk show on the radio and the internet, interviewed in all the public UFO publications, and he made a lot of money selling videos, his movie, to people who were active UFO nuts. I loved the story. It was a great movie. I'm a UFO nut, although I did write a book about them, but I just enjoyed it for itself. But he made a lot of money and got a lot of press coverage because he was big in that field. So those are kinds of things that you want to do in the launch. You want to make a big splash. You want to have book signing parties. You want to give talks. You want to give interviews, things like that. Now, the last step is keep going. Now that you've got all this done and your book is launched, then let's keep going. And we're going to start with simplifying your plan. Look at what worked and what didn't work. Some people are saying, if it didn't work, I didn't put enough effort into it. I know if I only did more, it would work. Maybe it would, but don't bet on it. Reinforce your success, not your failure. So look at what you've done, and if it didn't churn out the results you were looking for, move on, because there's a lot of options and you can only do so many of them. Okay, another thing you can do once your book is out is if your book covers an area, a topic that might be newsworthy, then you use blogs to get your press coverage. And I'm going to use a hypothetical. Imagine that that book I told you about at the beginning, the guy who did a hit job on Political Candidate, imagine it had actually gotten out there and been accepted, and he was successful with it. Anytime the news had a story about this candidate, he could write a short blog, 250 to 750 words, where he explained what this news story is about and why it's important. Then you use your media list to contact media who might be covering this story and say, I'm an expert, I've written this book, and I can put this story into context for your audience. And that will get you a lot of coverage. Let me give you an example. In the year 2008, I was in the process of writing a book on how to win political campaigns. I used to run a lot of political campaigns. I don't do it anymore. But at the time, I learned some things that were honest and ethical and would actually help you win. So I was writing a book about that, not the dirty tricks or the illegal things, but the honest and ethical things that really work to help you win a political campaign. It wasn't finished yet. And as I look at my records now, it still isn't finished. But at the time I was working on it. So I was the author of the forthcoming book, X. So 5 times I saw political stories where I had a different slant on it than everybody else. And they weren't really getting the coverage that they deserved. I thought they were bigger stories than the media was saying. So I'd write up these short blogs and I'd put them online, and then I'd email out to reporters that I knew would be interested in covering it. And what happened, I did this 5 times during that political season, which was 2008. I was on Cavuto 5 times. I was on Imus 5 times. I had 56 other broadcast interviews and more than 100 print and internet interviews. This is for coming up with 5 ideas where I could put them in perspective, because I was in the business of writing the book and because I used to run political campaigns. That's all the credibility I needed. If you've got a book finished, even more credible. So if your book covers and touches on something that's in the news, you can use that to get press coverage. Even novels work. I used to host programs for the History Channel on military technology. And one of the shows was on submarine disasters. And 2 of the guests who were on the show, who were interviewed for the show, were Tom Clancy and Clive Cussler. Now, both of them have written about submarines and submarine disasters, which was the topic of the book or the show. But they were novelists. But they were still, they're Tom Clancy and Clive Cussler, but still, they were considered expert enough that the History Channel flew camera crews to where they were and interviewed them. I wanted to go with them, and they said, no, you don't need to do that. We'll just interview them and splice it in there. I just wanted to meet them because I read both of their books and I love them. Anyway, yeah, exactly. So you can use your book as a credibility source so that you can get in the news. And then when you get in the news, make sure that you show them the book, you tell them it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever else, and there you go. Okay, I've talked about the virtual platform. Once your book is out, really work the virtual platform, quoting from the book, in blogs and stuff like that, and say, okay, in my recent book just came out, here's the chapter you might be interested in, and you can see that on my website, or you can see it on my Facebook page. Again, you're giving it to them for free, and then you're hoping that they'll go and buy it. You do radio interviews and podcast interviews. I guess it was last month, I bought a new list of podcasts. This is a media list. It's a 607-page online book. It's huge, but each podcast has a lot of stuff there. 650 podcasts, and each one of them gets almost a page of who it is, links to it, what they're looking for, all this kind of stuff. I started pitching one of my clients, and in the first week, I got 4 podcast interviews with them, and they all went great. And we still have one that's scheduled for July, and I'm going back now and promoting more because I didn't get anywhere near through the whole book. I also have a radio list that's similar, lists over 1,000 talk radio programs and how to get in touch with them, what they're looking for. And using these, you can get in front of talk show hosts and get interviewed on radio or on a podcast or internet radio or television. Now, why is that important? Because that will go online and they will send you a URL. Then you can promote that URL, and you can say to all your Facebook groups that you're working, for instance, you say, hey, I was just interviewed by Neil Cavuto. Here's a link, go see it. It's based on my new book. So people will go and see it. And if they're interested, then they'll go buy the book. So this is a real good way of doing it. And these lists are not expensive. The radio list cost $345. The podcast list cost about $300. And they're both really exceptional. And if you like the podcast list, I am looking to share the cost of it with a couple of people to get my costs down and get them access to it. So if you're interested, let me know later. If not, that's okay. And then just keep doing things to generate news. Keep doing things to generate news. And as long as you do, you'll stay viable. Now, let me explain to you how long you can do this. In 2003, my late wife and I wrote a novel based on a real UFO encounter that took place in Kelly, Kentucky in 1955. in the UFO world, it's famous as the Kelly incident, which is the title of the book, but it's a novel. And so we had a reporter sent in from St. Louis to go to rural Kentucky and cover this story, which they thought would be played for laughs. Hayseeds, see UFO aliens, yada, yada, yada. Well, this was one of the most unusual sightings or encounters in the history of UFO sightings, because it lasted 26 hours. And there were 22 people in this farmhouse that were besieged by these strange looking aliens that look nothing like the aliens you see in the media. They weren't gray. They didn't have big heads and frail bodies. They looked almost like Tolkien dwarves or something. They were really not friendly. And they seemed to be impervious to at least 22 caliber rifle fire, because one of the farmers ducked out the door, shot one that was on the roof of the house. The thing fell off and then hopped up and kept going. What made it really believable for me is when it was over and word got out, people from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne Division, came over, seized the farm, took everything, including the topsoil, everything that might show any evidence of an alien encounter. They wanted it all. They drove the people off their home, off their farm, dismantled the house and took it with them, stripped down to the subsurface level all the way there, so that every trace evidence of this alien encounter was gone. And we were able to write it because one of Carol's cousins had been among the 22 people in this house. So she had a family member who had actually lived through it. But it's still fiction, because we told it as a story of this reporter discovering it after the fact, what happened. She was obviously a disbeliever and then later became something of a believer. And there was also a romance involved. It was kind of an interesting, I mean, it was more than just a UFO story. It was a full human source. Okay, that book was published by Gateway Press and was in print from 2004 to 2012. When that 2012 came along, they took it down and sent the rights back to me. In the meantime, my late wife had died. So I took the rights and I took it and I published it on Kindle. I did no promotion on it. I just put it out there. And I didn't know anything about the technology. So I just cut and pasted the whole file in there, put a cover photo that was just a stock photo of the Earth from space. And that's, it sells, continues to sell. Now, whenever there's a big UFO story, like you may remember last year, the US Navy officially released some gun camera film from fighters that had seen and followed and tracked a UFO near an aircraft carrier. And the Navy said, we don't know what it was. It was the UFO. When that came out, I started commenting on it in the various UFO blogs and places like that, and on YouTube, where they have had videos of it, and it said, as the author of the Kelly incident, available on Amazon, here's what I think. And my book sales went up. And understand, this is like 17, 18 years after the book came out. And I'm still able to promote it when there's a tie-in news story, and I still sell books from it. So continuing your promotion is a valuable and a viable thing. And don't let it go away. As long as the book's available, you can promote it when something comes up. So that is my quick and dirty thumbnail sketch of what to do to market and promote a book from beginning to end. I'd like to throw it open to questions, and then after that, we can talk about why self-editing is impossible for you. You can't edit your own work. And then if you've got nobody else to edit your work and it needs edited, how you can do workarounds, even though you really shouldn't be able to edit it, but I'll show you how to do it anyway. But right now, anybody got any questions about the marketing side of this? Yes, Linda, you need to if you're going to talk, unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah. I just didn't react. I guess I would need to check out Facebook itself. Is there a place on Facebook to add a blog? Is there a special kind of format that you use for that blog? And if I'm referring to it, let's say in a discussion group, how do I get the link that will go to that blog?
Okay, what I do is, if I'm doing that, I have a standard Facebook page, just a Facebook page. I will take and post the blog there, and I'll use the technique that lets you pin it, which means it stays at the top of your column of what you've contributed until you unpin it. So then you just give them the URL of your Facebook page, and the first thing they see is your blog.
Okay.
And of course, that means you got to set up a Facebook page, and you also have to control how people comment, and how to get rid of people who comment, inappropriately. And that's where having somebody who knows how to do it is useful. I mean, I know what needs to be done. I don't do that myself, not even for my own site, because I would rather spend my time doing other things. But the basics are, go ahead.
Oh, because I found all these lists of people. First, it was people I know, and then it was people who know people that I know. And then the third list was people who we think would be interested. And that's where I'm going, this is not difficult to get people to sign up. I mean, within a matter of an hour, there were like 80 some people. But then, like I said, first I was puzzled how in the world they were getting my cell phone number. But they use that little feature on the top on Facebook where they can video chat with you. But it's like, it just blew up my phone. It was the biggest mess. I had to block so many people. And at that point, I didn't even want to sort through who might be good to keep, who not. I just got rid of everybody. It was like, it was such a disaster. How do you control who wants to join in, and how to approve them when it
Okay,
turns out?
Those are a couple of good questions. First of all, disable that little thing at the top that says that you can do video calls, because if that's how people are getting your phone number, you don't want to do that. Don't give it to them.
But it's there automatically. I couldn't find any way to remove it.
Well, again, you find the right person, and they know how to do it. It's in the settings. I had somebody walk me through it because I didn't want that.
Yeah.
I didn't want. I mean, I work out of my house. I have worked out of my house for the most part since 1985. I'm not dressed for success when I'm working in my home. I wouldn't want a video call to come through that I hadn't scheduled in advance. I just want to. In fact, just recently gone out and bought a green screen backdrop, and it arrived today, but it's more complicated than I thought, so I didn't set it up yet, so that what's behind me doesn't show up in the video. I can project an image onto the green screen, and that makes a lot of sense. It was under $30 at Amazon. It was really, and it looks really nice, but it just, I picked it up like at 5 o'clock this afternoon. I did not want to be doing, like the night before Christmas, putting together the dollhouse kind of thing. I just wanted to come in tonight and just hope that, you all will notice that there's some kind of chaos. What I do when I'm not writing or working is I build model airplanes and rocket ships and cars and stuff like that. So I've got all my modeling stuff around here too. It's kind of a one-stop shop for me. I come in here in the morning and I never leave. So I just disabled that. Another way you can do this is to, there's a site called Blogger, and it's owned by Google, and it's free. And you can go in and create a blog site, and it gives you an address like, Mary talks about writing at blogger.com or blogspot.com, one of those. Now you then go in, and this is really easy to do because I'm not a technical person, and I figured it out in about 5 minutes. You either write the blog on the screen or you cut and paste it in, and then you set it up, and the instructions are really clear. You set it up so that anybody who wants to comment, you have to clear the comment. They can't post a comment. They can send you a comment, and then you approve them or disapprove them. And I get a lot of comments from people who are in India and they're trying to do some kind of business. It's got nothing to do with me, so I block those. I haven't had too many foul-mouthed people, but those I no trouble blocking. But that way, it's not on a Facebook page, it's on a blog site, and it's searched by Google because they own it, and you can post anything you want there, and then you provide a link to it. So you can say, instead of come to my Facebook page, you can say, come to my blog site, and here it is. Now, the ideal kind of thing is to have a WordPress-based website where you actually can post blogs on there. And that's very easy if you understand WordPress. But if you don't understand WordPress, don't try this at home. I have my own webmaster. I've worked with her for over 20 years because while I'm sure I could figure it out, the time I spend figuring it out would not justify the effort. Whereas I can barter work with her because I do stuff for her, she does stuff for me. We're friends and we help each other out. Initially, I paid her $500 to set it up, but to maintain it, I just I'll write press releases for her or something like that, come up with a strategy for one of her clients, things like that, things that I can do in my sleep. And she finds it efficacious to let me do it. So you can set it up. You can set up blogs on your Facebook page, and I told you how to do it. I would rather have them on my web page or on a blogger site, and then just use the URL to get people there. So that would be my preference for you, Linda, is just to have a little thing on your Facebook page saying, I've just written a new blog. It's on Blogger or it's on my website. Here's the link. Go see it. And then you don't have to worry about that. And have somebody show you how to go through the settings and disable anything that is intrusive to you. Like, I hate it when people poke me rather, on Facebook. It's like, who are you and why are you intruding in my life? And generally it's trying to promote themselves, and they think, oh, I'll do this because then he'll come and see my Facebook page. No, I go there and then I track them down and unfriend them, and that's it, because I don't like that. So I try to block it. Other people don't care. That's fine. So, Linda, did that answer your question?
Yeah, still leaves me puzzled with a lot of it because I mean, it like took up all my voice messaging. I had to empty those mailboxes. I mean, it was just relentless, and it went on all night long, from Nigeria, from India, oh my gosh. I can't even tell you what a mess it was.
Wow.
I bleed for you, but there are ways to set it up without that being enabled. I've never gotten one of those calls, and I'm fairly active on Facebook on behalf mostly of my clients, but sometimes for me too. I see it as a business tool. I don't go there to make friends. I don't expect to make friends. I make friends going to, like when we met at Barnes & Noble, I'd get to see each of you face to face. We could talk to each other, and over a few meetings, we start becoming friends. And some people would say, hey, let's go grab lunch sometime, things like that. You build a relationship. Facebook, I got 2,500 followers, and 2,400 of them, I don't know who they are, why they're following me. I'm probably following them. I don't know why I'm following them. It's just, I have that. So if somebody says, how many followers do you have? I can say, oh, I got 2,500. I would much rather have 500 people in a Facebook group where each person in advance says, I want to talk about this subject. I want to know about this subject. I'm signing up for this because I care. So they've got buy-in, and that makes a big difference, I think.
Well, I was also concerned how I was thinking when I set up my Facebook page for my book, that it would be separate from my own personal one. I didn't think the two would just automatically link themselves. And I'd end up getting all kinds of stuff coming through on my regular Facebook page when, again, I just did not know what I was doing enough. And I just, like you're saying, I don't want my life that invaded. I don't just say yes to people to be friends, because my idea of friends is different than just that someone clicks on my name. I just don't want the quantities. I really want it
Yeah.
more for promotional, but and then these other webinars, I'll go in chat with them. Eventually they might be interested in your book. Just find common ground and chat with them. I don't have time or interest in chatting with 500 people who I don't know, who probably are not interested in a children's book. It's just.
Right.
What you need to do is get somebody who will manage your social media for you, and they will, in your persona, they will go and post on the Facebook groups and other places where people who like children's books gather.
Yeah.
Then you've got, and that's what you do. For my clients, like I said, I've got a guy here in town who really knows this stuff on this. And I bring him in with my clients to manage that side of it, because while I know how to do it and I have done it, I don't enjoy it. And it seems awful time consuming and not particularly results generating for the time I spend on it. But I'll pay him to do it, and I know it gets done, and it gets done professionally, and I don't have to worry about it. So to me, that's worthwhile. Now, this is paying clients, so when I pay him, I'm not paying him out of my pocket, I'm paying him out of the client's pocket. But still, if you want to have the impact of social media without the time involved, time that you could be writing another children's book or going and giving talks about your book to seniors groups and others where they, I think that grandparents looking to buy things for their grandkids is a wonderful way to sell children's books. Because I got 5 grandkids, and every time I go to a reading where somebody's reading children's books, I buy them for the ones that are age specific and gender specific that I think would like them. And I'll frequently, out of the 5, I'll buy 3 books for 3 of the grandkids.
Yep.
I've got 3 that are all the same age pretty much, with different fathers, but
Ned?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
This is Andre from Las
Yeah.
Vegas.
I can see that.
This is a follow up on the question that I think her name is Linda had. Is it better to have your own author Facebook page, or is it better to have one Facebook page per book?
I would say I would rather have a single author page, especially if you're writing a series of books or if you're writing books in the same close genre. Like if you wrote murder mysteries, even if it's not a series character, but each one's a standalone, you can build a brand as a mystery writer. Or if you write children's books, as Linda does, you can build a brand as a children's book author. And if they come for one, they'll learn about the others. So that would be my preference. But there is a case to be made for having a separate page for each book, and you aggressively promote it that way. And
yep. Ned, can I help out?
Sure, go ahead.
Can I help you out for a minute? Okay, so when it comes to web pages, hi Linda. When it comes to web pages, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The way a web page is normally set up is you have the page itself, and you can create as many pages as you want. However, each page on each page you can put as many posts as you want. Let me give you an example very quickly. Let me see. I'm going to back away for a moment. And I am going to my page. And what I will do is I will share that page with you.
Okay.
All right. Can all of you see the page?
Yes.
Wow. Great.
Yes.
All right. This is a standard WordPress page. I recommend WordPress for everyone. And what you are seeing here are posts on my web page. However, if you look over here, I actually have different pages. Each one of these is a different page. Alternatives is a different page. So if I click on alternatives, what you're going to find is the page itself and posts, any posts that are on the page. Looks like it's a little slow. Okay, so here we are. This is alternatives, and notice that you still have access to my main page. If we go, we can go to about, which talks about me. And again, this is a separate page. Here, and I'm going to show you now, I've also linked a separate website. And this is my website called Peeves. And this is actually a magazine. Peeves is a magazine, but, and I believe, let's see, I have the definition of peeve. But anyway, I'll have to check it. I haven't checked this in a while. But you'll see there are different links, and any of these links can take you to our 5 Arts website. So so what I'm doing is I'm utilizing my personal page, my personal website as a launching place, as a launch pad to go to other areas. Okay, but within this page, like I said, these are all separate posts. This is a post. And each of these posts, these are not separate pages, they're separate posts. So, and I've been keeping this up since, I think it's 2007, I believe.
Wow.
So there are a lot of posts. This goes back years. And Ned, I think, had talked before about how you can actually you can create a web page into a book. Ned brought that up once as well. So I have enough material for a book. I myself, however, prefer to just keep it the way it is. All right, so with that, I am going to go ahead and mute again and take myself out of this. Let me go ahead and stop sharing so we can get back to Ned.
Okay. Bob, thank you for mentioning about people who write their books online. Here is a classic example, one of my favorite books. I read it about twice a year. And this was written as a blog. This guy who wrote this was a space exploration fanatic. His idea of fun was figuring orbital trajectories from Earth to Mars at different times in the rotations of the planets and stuff like that. When he finished the book, he wanted to publish it on Amazon, but give it away. And Amazon said, no, we're not going to give it away. So he priced this book as a Kindle book for 99 cents. A week he put this out as a book, he got a call from a publisher who gave him $1 million contract to put it in print. And he also got a call from a movie producer who paid him another big bucket of money for them to make the movie with Matt Damon, which I highly recommend. And any of you who are interested in the movie side of things and how novels get turned into movies and all this, read this, watch the movie. They are very close, much closer than most times. But obviously, this book has got, let's see, around 375 pages. You can't put that in a 2-hour movie. It picked the right items to show. But this is something that you can do. And I've written several books as blogs and then pulled them together. And one of them is now in its fifth edition. It's called Beautifully Profitable, Forever Profitable. It's about how to market plastic surgery practices. It's for doctors who do plastic surgery or cosmetic dermatology. But I've been writing columns for trade magazines for a number of years for one of my clients. And decided to make a book and pulled them all together. And it took me from the time she said yes to the time it was printed and delivered to a trade show here in Las Vegas was 6 weeks, which is probably the shortest time I've ever spent creating a whole book. This is not, that book is now in its 5th edition. It keeps getting updated as technology changes, and it continues to be a success for her. So, yeah, that's a good way of doing it. And I've done several of those. And as I said, The Martian is, I think, the best example of that. So if you're going to blog as Bob does, I bet if he's been blogging for what did you say, 13 years now? You could pick a topic and pull out the blogs from that, update them, string them together, and you got a book. It would take you very little time to do. So, but to get back to the core question, would I do a Facebook page for each book, or would I do a Facebook page for myself as an author with all of my books there? It depends on the kind of books you're writing. I write novels, I write science fiction, I write mystery, I write nonfiction how-to, I write other kinds of nonfiction on nonfiction history. I would probably want to have a page for each one of those, a different Facebook site for each one of those, because for the book, but for the category. Like I've got 10 historical novels set early in World War II that I publish on Kindle. If I bring those out in print and then I want to promote it, I would want to create a Facebook page for all 10 of them as a group. But I wouldn't want to cross that over to the science fiction stuff that I've done, because people who want historical fiction are not necessarily interested in science fiction. So, and I noticed here that Andres, that he'd stepped in and joined us. I've told you that there's a guy here in town that I use to do my social media for me and for my clients. And that person is Andres Fragosa. And he's the one I've used him. I worked with him first with a client almost 2 years ago, Larry Johns rather, who wrote a book on the Bainbury atomic testing disaster in the test site outside of Nevada, outside of Las Vegas. And we took it private. He had a publisher, but the publisher wasn't doing anything, so we got the rights back. Andres reformatted the entire book so that we could publish it in Kindle and as a print on demand. And then he has handled the social media for that. And he's handling social media for another client right now with a book Cold But Not Forgotten, which is a murder mystery set in Elko, Nevada. And so if you ever need somebody, and Linda, I'm thinking about you particularly, if you ever need somebody to talk to who I turn to for expert answers in this area and for doing it, Andres is somebody I can recommend because I work with him. So are there any other questions about the marketing side? Yes.
In the chat or someplace, can you type Andres' contact information?
I can do you one better. Andres, will you put that in the chat, please?
Ah, there we go.
It'd be my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Andres hosts a weekly read and critique session that used to meet at the Alpha Voyager Gallery, an art gallery down near the Strip. That obviously it's closed because everything's closed. So he takes it all virtual, and he really knows how to do that too. So if you need that kind of professional expertise, if you want to do a series of these like I'm doing, I couldn't do it without Bob, because Bob sets this up. I just show up. If I had to do it myself, I probably wouldn't be here, or I would have found, Bob or Andres or somebody. So by all means, let's share the wealth here. And if anybody needs those kinds of services, give Andres a call or drop him a note, because from my perspective, I've worked with him for a number of clients over a number of years, and I've never had anything but positive feedback from my clients, and everybody seems to love what he does, which makes me look good. So I'm very happy to use it. So any other questions on the marketing side? Or if not, I'll get to the editing stuff. Going once, going twice. Okay. All right. There is a good and scientific reason for why you cannot edit your book. And that is because your brain knows what it's supposed to say. So when you're reading your book online, you've written it on a computer and it's on your screen, you're reading on your screen, your eye sees what's supposed to be there instead of what really needs to be there. You know what you meant to say, so you read it and you miss that there's a word missing or it's not said right because it just doesn't fit. That's one reason why you can't edit yourself, is because your brain doesn't work that way. Another reason is because your brain doesn't work that way. And the third reason is your brain sees what it's supposed to see. It's something that you can't get around. It's brain science. The way you can get around that is, first of all, to hire somebody to edit for you, or get a friend to edit for you if they know something. Do not get your weird Uncle Ralph to edit for you, or your mom, or anybody else in your family, or close personal friends, if they have no experience in editing. Now, I'm kind of lucky. I'm married to a professional book editor, so if my stuff needs edited, all I have to do is convince my wife that she really should read my book, and tell me what's wrong with it, which she loves to do. But if you're not living with a professional book editor, do not hire somebody because he's your out-of-work brother-in-law or something like that. That's also, you don't want to have them as webmasters. I know an awful lot of people who have out-of-work brother-in-laws as webmasters. It's almost like a contagion. You don't want to do that. Just give them the money. Don't ask them to do anything for it. So, given that you can't, there's one other thing about editing, especially if you're editing on the screen where you typed your book or your story or your chapter, whatever, is when you make a change on a printed piece of paper, you write out, you cross out a word and put in another word. That's fine. When you're doing it on the computer, you say, oh, and I'll do this, and I'll do this, and I'll do this. And what happens is it's no longer editing, it's rewriting. And what you rewrote then will need to be edited. So it's a never-ending cycle. You cannot stop it on a computer. It's like an unnatural thing. Okay, so because there's that subconscious psychological thing, what really does, I mean, I searched out the brain science. I'm not a big brain science fan. It's about as dull as dishwater, but the eye-brain connection is very specific, and it really is. I mean, it's the real deal. So trust me on that, or spend weeks reading brain science. And okay, if you're lucky and if you've done things right, you can do a fair job of editing your book, especially if you've given it some time between when you wrote it and then you come back and edit it later. But there's better ways. And the first one has the virtue of being free, and that is to find beta readers who will agree to read your book and give you their opinions. First of all, you've got to trust them implicitly to do a good job. You have to respect them implicitly that they're honest enough to provide you useful developmental editing, which is pointing out the holes in the book or the redundancies in the book or what have you. It's not just words in a row. It's what's there 17 times and what's there, what's not there that should be there, things like that. So if you can find beta readers who can do that, that's great. One thing, you also have to find people who are willing to commit to doing it quickly and then doing it. Because I've had people say, oh, I'll beta read that, and 6 months later say, yeah, I'll get around to it sooner or later. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not looking for a round to it. I want my book edited. So that's it. So if you can't find beta readers, what do? The first one I'm going to suggest is what I call the ear-brain workaround. The wiring in your brain between your eye and your fingers, that's what you do when you're writing. When you're listening to something, different brain connections. And since you don't write with your ear, you will hear things that you can't see. And so what you need to do is record your work and then listen to it play back, or find somebody else who will record it for you so that you can then listen to them read it. Or you can go to an online, I mean, I think Word has a thing where it will read to you what you've written, but that's really a poor choice because there's not a human on the other end of it, and it's not going to sound right. You're trying to have somebody who reads it honestly, and then you'll hear what's missing. You will immediately start seeing the problem when you do this. If you listen to somebody reading it, or you even read it yourself and record it and play it back, you will hear things that your eye never saw. And once you hear them, then your eye can see them, and you can make those changes. But I would use the Word service that I don't know what you would call it, but Word documents, you can have them read back to you by your computer. I would really not do that. Another way to do it is to edit the book by printing it out. And for this, because you're breaking the eye to hand barrier, because you're using different connections when you're writing something as opposed to when you're typing something. So if you print it out, then you come back and you look through it that way, you'll see things that you missed. You'll see more or hear more when you do it the listening way, but you'll see things that you missed. I would suggest that you use a red pen or another color. I particularly prefer purple. I don't know, it just does the right thing for me, for my connection. I get emotionally distraught when I see red edits because it reminds me of Mrs. Demeter back in the 7th grade and how she would treat my early writing efforts. She'd bleed all over it. So I prefer another color, but you want something other than black, because black or dark blue, you edit it and then you come back to input it, you can't see it. It blends in. And what I do is I not only edit in a colored ink, but at the side margin, either the left or the right side on that line, I put what the I think technically it's called a caret, C-A-R-E-T, but it's a kind of horizontal V that points in towards that line. So I can just look down this margin where there's nothing and see that and I go, oh, there's something on that line, and then I'll find it. So that's just a help. Another thing, when you're going through and editing it in print, I would suggest that you don't stop at each point and try to figure out how to fix it. Circle it and then keep going. Don't break your flow. Circle it and keep going, and then come back later and figure out how each one you want to do it. And as I mentioned earlier, if you can put some calendar time between the time you wrote it and the time you edited it, then it'll seem fresher, and therefore you're going to be able to do a better job of it. And by doing it in writing, you're not going to let yourself slip into rewriting on the paper. Then the next trip is to put the edits in the manuscript and don't change anything else. And that's like trying to quit drinking or smoking or some other bad habits you have. It's just real hard to do, and it takes willpower, because you're going to want to, oh, if I fix this, I'm going to fix all these other things. And then, as I said, you're going to be back into new copy that needs to go back and be edited again. It defeats the purpose of editing. If it needs to be rewritten, stop your editing and go rewrite it, then edit it. The editing should be done when you're satisfied with the draft. And if you're not satisfied, then don't. And then after that, you want to find somebody who will be your last eyes. And this is somebody who can spot typos and punctuation errors and things like this. Somebody who will do it quickly and get back to you. Somebody that you trust. It's kind of like a beta reader, but this is like the last thing to do before you send it off to the publisher, or you send it off to Kindle or to Lightning, Ingram Spark, those kinds of things. Anybody that one last thing, anybody that helps you with editing, be sure and thank them in the acknowledgments page at the front of the book. there is nothing quite so powerful as honest thanks to somebody, because they will feel like they're appreciated and then they will do it again. Currently, I've been working with Sherry Rosenthal, and she's writing a great book, and I really like it. And she's in a reading critique group I'm in. And I have been, when we were getting together, I would give her some edits, and she always came back to me and said, your edits really helped. I've improved my chapter because of your edits. I thank you for it. Well, now that it's all virtual and we're doing the virtual critique, I can't keep, because I'm looking at it on the screen and I have to immediately feed it back. I can't really make notes. So I've asked her, and she's done it. She sends me the draft of those that she read of those chapters. And then I'll take the time to go through it and do it, because she is so consistently appreciative in a way that I feel is sincere and honest. She mentions specific things. It's not like just, oh, thank you. And so I would be glad to do anything for it, because I now am invested in this book. I've helped make it better. So I will be glad to help make it better more. And there's no financial involved. It's just, she knows how to say thanks in a way that I believe. And so I'm a big fan of her work anyway. It's more of, she's kind of has an MFA, and she teaches creative writing at one of the local colleges or universities. And it's not the kind of book that I would normally read, but it's so well written that I really enjoy it. I'm not going to go out and read books like it, but I really enjoy it, and I'm glad to work with it. Find people like that. Find people who will say, all right, I want to help you, and be your last eyes, to look for look for things large and small that aren't there. So that, in a nutshell, is what I want to tell you about self-editing, and why scientifically you can't really objectively self-edit. There's things you'll miss, and yet here's things you can do to work around it. Now, one of the things that you'll miss, and I'm going to tell a story of myself. A couple years ago, I wrote a book on why you should write a book, how you should write a book, how you should publish a book, and how you should market and promote a book. And I sent it to my editor, and I said, what do you think? And I was all excited. I think we'd get it published. I was expecting to get it published last summer. She sent it back and said, there's at least 3 books here. You needed to just edit out. And so you have a book on why and how you should write a book, and then another one on how you should market and promote a book. And, so come up in 3 versions. So I'm working on the marketing one, and it was exactly right. I was too close. I couldn't see it because I was too close to it, but she was right. And so I'm now working on it, and I'm glad for it, because it would have been a disaster the way it was. If I just put it out there, it would, even if I had somebody go through and correct the typos, it would not have been a good book, because it was too confused, too lacking in direction.
Not only that, now you have 3 books instead of 1. That's the best part.
Well, that is another good part. You're exactly right. That's great. But you get to a point where you think, my work is done. I've turned it over to the editor. Next thing you know, it's gonna be published, and I can, start moving ahead. Now I have to go back and rework the whole thing. And I'm in the process of it, but it's not my highest priority right now, because I've got some other things that are more interesting to me. That's another thing, is if you're an eclectic writer like I am and write all kinds of things, it's really easy to get distracted. And it's kind of like you make a correction and then you start rewriting. It takes, intense focus to stay hooked on one book when you've got so many others you want to write. But I guess that's better than not having any ideas.
Yeah.
So anybody have any questions on the editing side of things?
I do.
Okay, go for it.
I have a couple of authors who I'm editing their book. The issue that I have is that I cannot edit their book too much, because it ends up losing their voice. Both authors have a very, very unique voice. And when it comes to editing them, if we edit it to be completely grammatically in proper English and all that stuff, it loses its voice. Do you recommend to check various editors before submitting your book, or do you just go with what the editor says?
No, one thing I like about being an editor and also using an editor is that I am free to, when it's my book being edited, I'm free to decide what I want to accept and what I don't want to accept. I don't have to take their advice if I don't want it. But you're talking about own voice, and especially in a work of fiction, although this also applies to nonfiction, the voice is more important. Things can be grammatically perfect and read very wooden and not make anybody excited about it. But if you have somebody who speaks in a dialect or has a certain kind of attitude, I know a guy who's from the Bronx, and his books, you would never doubt that he was from the Bronx when you read his books. I'm from the South, and I have a good or bad habit of bringing in characters who are from the South and who, well, I tone way down the accent, because I mean, if I was rotten the way I talked when I was growing up, you know, I'm not sure that anybody would want to read it, but there are the turns of phrase and things like that you want to bring in to bring that character to life. So I would do, if somebody's got a legitimate found voice, own voice that's important to the story, work with them. If it's more of an objective book where that just gets in the way, fix it. You know, in a nonfiction book, people expect you to be fairly well educated for the most part. And if you don't sound like you're educated, you're not going to do well. But in fiction, characters can be anybody. I mean, how old was Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird? Well, as an adult, she's telling the story, but this, you know, she's telling the story of this young girl, this prepubescent girl who's going through these things, and she brought her to life. So I think, you know, that's really important. So I would say when you're editing these people, do a soft touch on it if they've got a voice that's worth salvaging. Now, years ago, early in my career, I was a speechwriter for 2 governors in South Carolina, and I wrote speeches on economic development issues. And I don't know why anybody thought that I knew anything about economic development. I was 21, I think, at the time I started doing this, so I didn't know much about anything. But they liked my writing. And what I did was I found their voice and I would write in their style. And I had 2 rules: sound like they sound and make them smarter than they are. Nobody objects to being made smarter than they are. They love that. But they want it to sound like them. So I would, and one was a Democrat and one was a Republican. And I mean, it wasn't like they were cookie cutters. They were 2 different people with 2 different styles. But it worked. And because I learned this early, I've been able to work with other writers and pick up their voices and respect that, because I understand the process. I learned it the hard way, you might say. But anybody can do it as long as they respect the voice that they're hearing. So that covered, Andres? You gotta unmute yourself to say yes.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
I said the whole thing, or just did that answer your question?
Yes, it does answer my question.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Thank you.
Anybody else? Other questions? Anybody have a horror story for editing? Oh, Linda, yes.
That always creates to me a little bit of dilemma, because as a teacher all my life, I just get really bothered by how much we're dumbing down our society and dumbing down our understanding of language skills, etc. So I can see keeping the voice if in fact that writer realized present that certain kind of character, versus the author saying, oh no, everything's fine, there's no problem with the grammar, and not realizing the grammatical errors that, you know, if you're trying to edit for someone, it's like, is it really worth getting some of that voice kind of cleaned up where they're not just speaking incorrectly to the point that, you know, you don't even look at it as any kind of real literary skill versus letting them let that character stay that way. Do you see what I'm saying? How
I do. And, you know, this gets into like I mentioned earlier about writing dialect. And if I was to write, ma'am, on, like I've talked as a boy growing up in Georgia, don't you know, and I put in all the uhs and the ums and the don't you knows in there, nobody would want to read it. But if I put in a few things that show, you know, that this character is a 14-year-old boy who's grown up on a farm in rural Georgia, and he has turns of phrase, you know, like a big rainstorm would be his frog strangler, you know, you know, something wasn't right, it was whoppy jarred. And if he was really mad at somebody, you might want to whomp him upside the head. So you put those in and you capture the spirit of it.
right.
In the Henderson Writing Group, we have a monthly book club, and in the last year or so, we read a story that was written by a Vietnamese refugee. He moved in here from Vietnam and was writing about the Vietnamese refugee culture here in the United States. And another one was written in the guise of a Native American who was in an urban tribe. I didn't even know there was one, but it was an urban tribe in Oakland. And so they were trying to hold their culture together while living in a big city. And you had to have that flavor in both of those books, and it was there. And yet the books were very literate. But when people were talking and it was dialogue, it was dialect. And their attitude, again, were reflected in that. But, you know, solid grammar has no place in dialogue, but has every place in narrative. You know, unless it's a first person story where the whole narrative is basically a dialogue one way or another. And then you have to deal with it. But yeah, I'm not talking about dumbing down. I'm just talking about catching the flavor and the essence of somebody from a certain place at a certain time. So you have the what I just say is the patina of verisimilitude. In other words, the appearance of accuracy.
I was thinking in terms of one book that I saw from this one publisher, and I asked the publisher, I said, you know, did you bring to this author's attention, and it's a children's book, and it was appalling. Sentences were not complete, grammar was off, and the publisher, this was an independent publisher, basically said, I told her she needed editing, but what can I do? She said, no, it's fine the way it is. So in that case, the author didn't even realize all of the errors, and yet, you know, it's a book that's out there supposedly for a children's audience. And I just, I don't know, I just cringe when we just mangle the English language, you know.
Remember Judy B. Jones? You know those books? Is that the book? It's totally messed up on purpose, I guess. But, you know, second graders learning how to misspell words. Yeah.
I kind of draw the line there. I have a client now, Rhonda Gatlin, who's written several children's books about a young girl growing up in rural Southern Alabama, which is where Rhonda is from, who learned about cooking, but also learned about other things that kids learn about, counting, for instance, and basic simple math things by making recipes with Granny. And so she would, and their voices have that Southern inflection, but it's completely readable. It's not an exercise in dialect, but you know it's from the South, and you know, it's not grandma, it's Granny, and you know, stuff like that. But it's very effective, and she's there to teach kids to, you know, one of them is a counting book, so they count everything that they're doing, and another one is a different kind of book, but you know, and they also all include a recipe for something like Granny's cobbler or what, you know, different things that they make. The kid and mom could go and actually make this cobbler because there are all the ingredients and there's the amounts, and the kid could actually live it out. But she is an accurate writer in that she doesn't make grammatical mistakes. She doesn't have typos or misspelled words or any of that stuff. And she is humble enough to seek help. She doesn't think she
Yeah.
knows it all. So she
Yeah.
seeks help, and I think she does a wonderful job. I didn't see the books until they'd been edited, and they've been edited very well. And I'm helping her on other parts of it, but it's very well written. And my 5-year-old granddaughter has a copy of her books because she's at the right age for it. I have two 5-year-old granddaughters, and they both have the books. So this is just what it's great books, great stuff. So don't give up your standards, but if you need to use inflection or dialect, do it, with a soft touch, and don't put substandard work out and say, oh, well, that's just the way they talk down there in Southern Alabama. No, they do, but that's not an excuse. So we got a few more minutes. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to, any personal experiences or questions or concerns about either the marketing or the editing or anything else? I mean, this is your meeting, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. And others here will.
When it comes to, oh, this is me again.
Oh,
I can't do it at all, but for myself.
yep.
What?
Let me see. Hang on. I'm gonna.
Talking without the mute.
Where's Ed? Where's Ed? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, Linda.
Oh, I don't know if this is still true, but in the past, I wrote college textbooks. And so I worked with a lot of editors for that. And one editor told me that one of the things they were required to do was actually read chapters backwards, because you don't get caught up in the content and forget what you're looking for. And so they would actually read sentence by sentence backward, and they would pick up more errors that way than if they were reading it. Again, going back to that idea of your mind, your mind tells you what maybe isn't there because it should be there. And by reading backwards, I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I could edit a book that way. I would just fit. I'd be so distracted, but that was their technique. So I don't know. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, in fact, my wife overheard you. She was coming down the hall, and she stuck her head in and said, yes, we editors do that.
Really?
Now, interesting, the first book I ever edited was for the University of South Carolina Press, and it was a book on aquaculture, which is the farm raising of catfish or shrimp or whatever in coastal areas, generally in old rice plantations, where they've got the paddies and they can fill them with the right kind of water and raise catfish or raise shrimp or whatever. And it was about as interesting as you would expect for a textbook on that subject. And my expertise in that area was I had graduated from an agricultural college. I didn't take any agricultural courses, but one quarter I lived in the ag dorm, and that apparently was enough to qualify me to edit this book. But in any event, I know that that's a technique that people talk about. I would rather have my fingernails pulled while somebody poured hot wax.
So, I have a comment on the editing. Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, I am. What I see a lot of, what I tend to do is when I'm editing somebody's book is that I read it out loud, because I tend to catch I tend to catch the sound of a word being misspelled or not used right. So I tend to read it out loud and then mark what I'm supposed to be marking. I also noticed that when we do writers groups, that when people are reading, we're not only reading the paper, but we're also listening to what they're saying, and you catch more by hearing it and reading it than just reading it by itself.
Absolutely.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you do? Does that work for you as well, Ned?
Yeah, that really does. And when it comes down to self-editing, I think that is the primary technique, is that you've got to either read it out loud, or better yet, read it out loud into a recorder and then play it back, or get somebody else to read it into a recorder or read it in real time. But better with a recorder because then you can stop and fix something and then go on. It takes that kind of different brain connections, between the eye and the fingers on a keyboard is one set of brain connections. Between the ear and the eye seeing it in print is a different. So what you've programmed into yourself when you wrote it is not there. It's in another part of your brain that's not being activated at that point. So that's, to me, the only way you can self-edit and have any hope of really catching stuff. And when I do read and critique, there'll be times when I'm reading something and inside I'm cringing because suddenly I see something that I hadn't seen 20 runs through editing it, but I hear it and I go, oh, bad word. So anyway, so that is a very, very
What
effective.
bad word?
Is that Ned?
But
Hello. Who?
Oh, that was me. I have Jordan in the background. He wants to say hi.
No. But thanks for asking. So anybody else got any comments, questions about what we talked about or what we didn't talk about? Yes, Linda.
obviously I get on here to talk, so this is good. I just want to thank you. I really, I always learn something valuable, and it's very motivational and inspirational. And I thank you, and I thank Bob for your expertise and your time and your willingness to share. You're appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Linda.
I agree with her. Thank you very much, Ned. This was very informative.
Yeah, you're
Good.
good. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good stuff.
Okay.
And
I
Ned,
agree-
you know, I
I
appreciate
agree,
you.
and I'm stuck with what aliens look like now.
Hang on just a minute.
That's in my brain now. Oh, you're bringing a picture. Oh, a photograph, right?
I got better than that.
Oh,
One kind of it.
This is going to be good. This is going to be
no.
good. Yay!
That's not what they look like.
Well,
Are
yeah,
they purple?
I know.
Are they purple?
This is kind of a metallic blue suit with a gray alien, and this is kind of a silver suit with a rather grayer alien. Actually, it's the same color, but when you shrink it down, it looks darker.
Looks like you've been to Area 51, huh? Your little souvenirs.
I have been, but these I got just because I build models, and I just thought, hey, I'll build aliens. So I have those. I also have, just so we're on topic here, I build UFOs.
Oh my God. Oh my goodness.
Relaxing.
So tell us, Ned, this is Kathy Merchant. Tell us in the book that you and your ex-wife wrote, the Kelly incident. Can you describe what those aliens looked like? You said they didn't look like the Greys, like the ones that
the
we
typical
always
gray.
see advertised or on.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
did they look like?
They were
What you showed
short.
us right now?
No, the ones
Yeah.
I showed you are like Spielberg, standard issue gray aliens. That's what everybody
Standard,
says.
right? But that's not what. Yeah. What are the
No,
ones that
what
in Kelly incident?
What we wrote about was these are guys who are maybe, they were dwarf size. They were 3.5 feet tall. They were bulky, husky, and incredibly nimble. I mean, they could jump onto the roof of the house,
Wow.
farmhouse, and stuff like that, and very energetic and kind of hairy. Definitely
Hairy?
not hairy.
You said Harry?
Harry.
Really? Harry?
Yeah, you were just. They were the. Nobody has ever seen their like again. It's like, that's one reason that the Kelly incident was such a big deal in UFO circles, is because it was totally outside the norm. These people came down into a farm field, exited their vehicle, and then laid siege to a farmhouse with 22 people inside, because it was a extended family kind of cookout, that everybody ran in the house for protection. And of course, this being a farmhouse in Kentucky, there were rifles there and people were shooting at the aliens and didn't seem to have any effect. So that was part of the not charm, but part of what made this story different, is this is like nothing like what you would see on TV or in the movies, or even read about in most books, because
Did any of the witnesses there say that they tried to talk in any way? Was there any attempt at communication, and what kind of form would that have been?
The aliens seem to be communicating vocally among themselves, but they made no attempt to communicate with the humans. Excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. No, they were just completely weird. Completely weird.
So since you said hairy, were they male or female or neither, or what?
There was no indication of gender.
Interesting.
I have pictured them. I think of them as male because they were aggressive and energetic and as I said, hairy. But I don't know whether the aliens have gender. And there was no communication, so they couldn't ask the aliens, hey, under that suit of yours, are you a guy alien or a girl alien or what? No, and we don't know. But they are really, really weird.
That must have been really scary. Oh my God, I can't only imagine.
I would not have wanted to have been there. I was perfectly fine writing about it, having researched it, but I would not have wanted to have been there. I mean, if you want to talk about scary weird, that's it. I mean, as far as the people knew, this was like an invasion. They didn't know that there was only one vehicle and one group of about 26 aliens.
Yeah,
they just, yeah. So anyway, it was pretty horrifying. And the public reaction to it was equally horrifying. As I mentioned, eventually the Army came in and just leveled the place and took everything away for examination. The people who had it happen to them were members of a local Baptist church, and they were kicked out basically because they had consorted demons or who knows what. I mean, this is a small town in 1955, and unless you've ever been in a small town in 1955, it's hard to describe the parochial view that they have. But they were shunned by their local church. They were members of. It was a thoroughly traumatic situation for these people, and it's never been explained. As I said, the Army came and took stuff, but they never issued a report to anybody that I've ever seen or come across saying this is what we found. Like there was residual radiation in the soil indicating that they used an atomic drive that we don't have the technology for, or there was this, or there was these alien spores from another planet that contaminated the area. None of that. Whatever it was, the Army hushed it up.
They buried it.
Yeah.
So
and they showed it.
Did they continue to live on the property after that?
No, they moved because I mean they lost their church, they lost their house, they lost, they could have gone back. They owned the property, but there was no. I mean, all the normal ties that hold people together, community, were shattered. I mean, Fort Campbell, right down the road. A lot of the people there. A lot of the men had served in the military there. I mean, there was a bond between the civilians and the military in that area. Very patriotic community, little bitty one. But just to give you an idea, it was smack dab in the middle of Christian County, Kentucky. I mean, this was, this is rural South. And so they left because they couldn't. one of them, my late wife's cousin, she was visiting there, and she was a kid at the time, so she didn't have the same effect as the owners of the home and the other adults who tried to find comfort from them in their support group, which was the church and the farmers in the community. And it was shattering for them. You know, Spielberg makes it look like, oh, it's a fun thing. There's pretty lights and the aliens are welcoming, and you go and everybody has a good time. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't that way. It was a horrifying experience.
Wow. I couldn't imagine. Gee.
Yeah. The only equivalent I think of is like, imagine that you were, one of Anne Frank's kin, and you were literally hiding between the walls in this house, and you saw the Nazis coming, and you knew the end was there. You know, that feeling of impending doom that there is no way out of. And that's kind of what they felt during their time until the aliens left. But then instead of things picking up for them, it just got worse. And it was, to me, it was a tragedy to them.
Yes.
And at a particular time, there were a number of incidents in central Kentucky. I don't know what it was about central Kentucky at that time, but for instance, there was a radar sighting, and some Air Force planes went up to check it out, and they never came back.
Oh, really?
I mean, yeah.
Wow.
They just appeared over Kentucky. And, the government kind of hushed it up. If there's a plane crash, you're supposed to have wreckage and if you bail out or whatever. No, they said that the guy thought he was chasing a UFO, but what he was seeing was the planet Venus. And yeah, in the middle of the day, you don't really see the planet Venus. And that he flew too far, ran out of fuel, and had to bail out or something. They made up a story, but it wasn't what really happened.
Yes. Yeah.
So something was going on at that time, and it stopped. And why did it stop? I don't know. Why was it there? Interestingly, the sightings that happened were all near military bases. Kelly is not far from Fort Campbell. The fighter intercept was near Fort Knox, which was at that time where all of our tank crews trained. It's not just a place to store gold. It was our national training center for people in tanks. So there were a lot of military vehicles there. And what happened, again, it's one of the mysteries that you don't know. So anyway, I found it fascinating to write about because it was so mysterious, and thought that by writing, in the voice of a character, of a reporter from out of town who comes in to try to get this story and gets more than she expected. And that's how we drew the story out. We weren't actually there at the occurrence. We let other people, the people who were there, talk about it and tell about it, because while you can hear what they say, you're not, nobody knows what went on.
Very strange.
Oh, everybody check. Bob just posted a note in the chat section. Tomorrow night, tomorrow night the group is going to have a read and critique session with Crystal Allen, and if you can break free from that to attend that, that's great. I've been to several of her programs, and she's excellent. So if you want to learn more about the writing part of writing, by all means, join Crystal and talk to her. Bob, is it the same login as this one?
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing as well. So like I said, if anyone does try to crash our party, or if they try to take over, I'm there. They won't be able to do it.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to know if people logged into this one could use the same login information tomorrow.
Yeah, like I said, there shouldn't, if I remember, I can't remember if there's a password or not. I believe there's a waiting room, but Rose, we would love to have you there.
Aww.
Especially professional journalist.
Aww. Flattery will get you everywhere now. 3 nights in a row. Oh my God.
Well, Rose, you've got to, Julie, she's brand new to the group. Honestly, her writing feels exceptional. But I mean, on Ed, when it's interesting because even Ed, I mean, when he's critiqued her writing, um, I mean, Ed finds, and I mean, he's been able to find whatever I have wrong instantly. But I'm telling you, with Julie's, she's really, I feel that she's an exceptional writer.
Absolutely.
All right, Ed, we're going to try unmuting you again. Hopefully your dog's not barking. Here we go. There we go. All right.
Yeah,
I got you, Ed.
yeah. My dog finally shut up.
So, like I said, Ed is going to be there tomorrow. Ed, like I said, is an awesome writer. He's an awesome. So.
Oh, stop.
But Ned.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have actually been putting some of what you have recommended to me to use as well. One thing you were talking about was you were talking about the voice, letting the character do the talking. So that's what I've been working on with my writing.
Good.
But, it's still, yeah, but I'll tell you. And what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to do what Bill did, which is don't go back and change it. Just, add it, write down what everybody's recommending and make the changes later. Just finish the work. So
yeah,
that's what I've been trying to do.
That's the way to do it, for sure. Just because somebody gives you a critique doesn't mean they're right. It's just their opinion. It may be helpful and it may be right on target, but don't cost your book its creativity because you were so busy listening to somebody else.
No, everything that Ed told me, any critique he's given me, I applied to the work and it just felt better. It sounded better.
Good. Well, that's what you need is critiquers that you can trust and respect.
Mhm.
Okay, well, it's 8:30, so if anybody's got anything else, let's hear it now. And if not, we can finish on time and go back to writing ourselves.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ned, for your presentation. It was just really informative. Got a lot out of it. Excellent.
You're welcome. And we'll be back here on the fourth Tuesday of this month, doing it all again, different subject, but the same focus.
Oh, and yep, Ned, I did want to add something. And that is that the recording of this video will be available on the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel as well. And
excellent.
I have posted that, but I think I can't remember if I hope it doesn't change. If it does, the URL, the link address, if it does change, if the web address changes, then I will repost it on our website.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again.
Thanks for attending,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Have a great evening.